Hello everyone, welcome back to another video with On Point Politics, and today we're going to be looking at my updated forecast for the 2024 presidential election. Hit the like button and subscribe if you enjoy content just like this, and make sure to comment your thoughts down below. And so, looking at the map, these are the safe Republican and Democrat states that I have filled out for each candidate. The Republican, Donald Trump, is at 149 safe electoral college votes. Kamala Harris is only at 81 safe electoral college votes. If we look back to 2020, we can see that Joe Biden had about 181 safe electoral votes. So she's down 100 safe electoral college votes because she is polling significantly worse, and based off all of the readjusted polling we've looked at, Donald Trump more than likely leads by 2 to 3 points in the national popular vote because of accurate pollsters showing what we're showing, and the fact that Kamala Harris is significantly underperforming Joe Biden's polling from the last election. Let's see if we can go over here. What I think is pretty interesting, we can see that Joe Biden just had a press conference the second that Kamala Harris started her rally, and this is what he had to say when they asked him about Kamala Harris. So if we can go ahead and pull this up, this is what he said.
There have obviously been a number of crises that the country has been facing over the past several days, with the hurricane, with the port strike, with the situation in the Middle East. Can you talk about how your vice president, who is running for the presidency, has worked on these crises and what role she has played over the past several days?
Well, I'm in constant contact with her. She's aware we're singing from the same song sheet. She helped pass all the laws that are being employed now. She was a major player in everything we've done, including passage of legislation which we were told we could never pass. And so she's been, and her staff is.
So pretty much what he's saying is that Kamala Harris, in terms of Biden's presidency, was a major player, from his own words, a major player in the policies that they both instated in his term as president. So he's basically, anything bad that came out of the administration or good, he's putting the blame on her. But unfortunately, most Americans don't have a high favorability rating of Joe Biden, and so that should be very concerning for Kamala Harris. If we go over here, this is the main problem of what's going on, and this is sort of what's kind of happening in a nutshell. So what happened is when Biden first came into office, he decided to pass the Keystone XL pipeline's lease termination by essentially doing it through executive order. And so what this was is he essentially removed the license that the Keystone XL pipeline had, which was helping us create our own energy here due to climate change, although he instated one in Russia like it was no big deal. But this was a huge problem because we had to stop making a lot of our energy over here. Some may still be made here, but a lot of this that we were making during the Trump presidency did come from the Keystone XL pipeline. And so what happens is truckers that have to drive products or food to stores, now it's more expensive to buy the gas or to buy the diesel, and so now that has to raise the prices of consumer goods like food and different products. So that is a huge problem. On top of that, we have illegal immigration, where essentially you can see right over here, Title 42, something Donald Trump had instated. Essentially, we have this right here where it was at an all-time low in October 2019, 2020, even in April of 2020, it was pretty low, but that could have also been due to COVID. But now we see the second Biden came into office, boom, the illegal immigration completely spiked up, completely spiked up. And we have the most illegal immigration unchecked that we've had in a pretty long time. And so this is what's happening now. And this is the economy, which I just discussed. And a lot of its problems were caused by getting rid of the Keystone XL pipeline. And this are the two biggest issues facing the country this cycle, unlike the midterms where the economy and abortion were some of the biggest issues per state. And so if we go over here, we'll be able to see very quickly something that I think is very, very interesting. if we go over here, we can basically look at what's going on with inflation and wages. We see that inflation spiked in 2021 and has kind of come down, but wages haven't compensated for how much inflation has risen the past couple years. And it is down, but the damage was so bad in 2022 that wages actually have gone down since 2022, by the way. And so that basically doesn't account for inflation. As wages go down, inflation goes down. That doesn't really mean a lot because now the wages are not outpacing inflation, so people still feel like there is a little bit of a pressure on them when it comes to economic stress. And what happens with illegal immigration and how this actually exacerbates the problem, Andrew Tate actually explains this perfectly in sort of a comical video, but there's no better explanation you could have for this. So this is basically how he explains illegal immigration. Very quickly, we'll go ahead and play the video, but it's a very, very straightforward concept.
When you have something like immigration, what it basically is the super rich people saying, I need more brokey time and energy, but the brokies, the native brokies, want too much money for their time and energy, or they want health care, or they want work standards, or they want pensions. No, I need pure slavery. I need slaves. So government, we would like you, using our money, we're going to give you lots of money to let in lots of immigrants so that the brokey bubble inflates with super brokies.
Super brokies, right. So draw one. Yeah. How racist can I make this drawing?
As racist as possible, please.
Sure.
Super brokies, so that we can get the super brokies to do what we want, so I can get further up the rich scale. That's effectively what's happening. Now, when they bring in the super brokies, this is very bad for the brokies, because the brokies now are less valuable, their time is worth less, their wages go down, plus they have to live amongst the super brokies. But the rich people don't care about that, because the rich people don't live anywhere near the super brokies. The rich people live separate. So the rich people are asking the government to bring in all these immigrants so that they can get richer, the poor can end up poorer, and the poor areas become terrible, and the rich places stay fine. What's actually interesting is the brokey bubble is expanding in real time because they're inflating the currency, because the government also has a secret deal with these super rich people here. We'll put a star here and a star here. And that deal is to print unlimited money so anyone who owns assets gets to get richer than ever before. So this is happening, which is also expanding the brokey bubble, and now we're at the point where they're actually starting to take the middle class and the people who used to be a little bit rich, and they're getting added to the brokey bubble. So the brokey bubble is now expanding out, and the kind of rich people are now becoming broke, because having $3 or $4 million used to make you rich, now it makes you a fucking peasant. It means nothing, and before you know it, you're living amongst this guy with a knife.
Okay, well, that's a little bit of a slight exaggeration at the end, maybe not even really, but you get the point, right? Basically what's going on is people that are in the lower class or in the middle class, now what happens is you have people that are coming in for cheap labor. But when you have unchecked illegal immigration, what happens is those illegal migrants are essentially taking jobs from American workers who could actually use those jobs. And then the problem is now Americans have to be taking 2 to 3 jobs to even make it afloat. And what happens is, yes, jobs are being added, but jobs are counted separately, not counted as one person taking all 3 jobs. So each individual job, despite possibly being held by one person, can count as 3 separate jobs. So actually very increased job growth while inflation is kind of going down, but unemployment's going up. Job increase is actually a really bad sign, because that means that a lot of people are taking 2 to 3 jobs to even stay afloat. And now illegal migrants are competing for those jobs, and with the government printing money, now somebody that could have gone by on 50K now necessarily cannot do that anymore. And this is what Andrew basically explained in the video. And now when we look at this is very, very interesting. You know, a lot of people haven't really been talking about this. This is something that Michael Whatley, the new RNC chairman, just actually discussed. But apparently, and this is similar to what I've been talking about, apparently Trump is leading in Arizona in the Trump campaign internals. Now, before you guys are like, oh my God, internals, blah, 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 blah. Internals have to be more accurate because the campaigns have to know what they're at, essentially. Like, they have to be more accurate. The Trump internals and the Kamala internals are basically showing the same thing. And so RNC Chairman Michael Whatley says that their internals have Trump leading in Arizona outside the margin of error, guys. So that's very fascinating because Maricopa County is a very now center county, but trending blue county, but they do have a lot of Hispanics there. Donald Trump has been gaining with Hispanic voters, and it may be possible that Trump is reversing the trend, the cycle, due to illegal immigration, which is the #1 issue there, essentially, alongside the economy. Trump is leading in Pennsylvania, Georgia, and Nevada, and in North Carolina, so you see it here. And now, Wisconsin, Michigan, and Minnesota in their polling are virtual ties. That's what RNC Chairman Michael Whatley just said, just not even that long ago. And by the way, guys, David D. Chapman, I am going to be on his show later tonight, so make sure to go check him out on X before we go on his show. I believe I'm going to be going on at about 8 p.m. Eastern time, so that's when I'll be doing that. But we see here that Donald Trump's polling is better than ever. And we have this, Ready Go Politics here. Everybody today is very excited about the Detroit turnout, especially Democrats are. But what Ready Go Politics is saying is he's saying Democrats are going full joy mode over early numbers in Detroit, fail to realize Detroit is just processing returns faster than other places. And it's funny because they're at 20% returned and it's like 20,000 votes. That's not really great considering Detroit has a way larger population than over 100,000 people. Looking at the return rates in majority black Southfield, Redford, and Pontiac are atrocious, as the black share of the mail-in requests in North Carolina and Georgia compared to 2020 or even 2022. Black share in the early vote / mail-in vote has actually gotten way lower, or white vote is more up, which is a bad sign for the African-American voters that are voting for Kamala Harris, or just even the Democrats in general, because that's not really those are not great numbers. I'm not saying these are bad numbers for them, but they are probably going to be the best early numbers for them this cycle, hence the cling and the cope, and they're not even good, but will they stand in a couple weeks? Not likely. So we're going to go ahead now, and we're going to look at this because a lot of people are saying, oh, Alan Lichtman predicted Kamala Harris to be the winner of the election. Oh, so I'm going to pull this up. This is something that I found that I think is pretty rich. So if we go up here, Alan Lichtman says the short-term economic key is not based on the perception of a bad or good economy, right? That's what he said. If you go to one of Harris' earlier versions of his own book, on page 32, which I gathered from the State of Daniel's YouTube channel, we can see the short-term economy key does not necessarily depend on whether or not an economic downturn meets a narrow technical definition of recession. Indeed, economists cannot agree on any simple objective way to gauge the beginning or end points of a recession, which is interesting because in his election prediction video with his son that he did on YouTube, he stated that we are technically not in a recession yet, but here he defines that economists can't necessarily even tell you when it ends or even begins. And he says here the key depends upon primarily on whether there is widespread perception of an economy mired in recession during the election campaign. So after saying now that Donald Trump is running and he has major TDS, now he says that the short-term economy key is not based on perception, but is based on GDP growth. But here, he states that it is actually primarily based on widespread perception of economy mired in recession, meaning that he should take the economic index number and really take that into consideration as to reevaluating his prediction, because according to his own words right here, he says that it is primarily based on the widespread perception of whether or not the economy is in recession or not, making him a pretty big flip-flopper on this key, which should be turned false given his own words, because we have economic data, the confidence is just not there. He actually flipped the key false in 1992 when a large amount of Americans basically didn't think the economy was in good shape despite the economic data, but he won't do it this year because he hates Donald Trump. But I'm just bringing this up because it's important to be honest and give accurate and factual information. And I just want to point out the inconsistencies with this model. He also says, oh, I have a great track record. I have this. I was able to predict Obama's re-election 2 years before, and polling is not useful at the time. Well, what's very funny is that when you look at the polling back then, look how much blue there is. Look at the polling from October to September of 2010. Obama leads Sarah Palin by like 16, 17 points. Another leads Sarah Palin, another one right there, another big win. You see Barack Obama leads Sarah Palin by quite a bit. He leads Mitt Romney by 3. Michael Bloomberg apparently was going to run third party. Hillary Clinton was listed as a third party candidate, getting 27%. That would have been pretty interesting. But guys, like, wow, what a shocker. He predicted Obama was going to win. Wow, I'm so impressed. In 2008, oh, well, duh, of course Obama was going to win. He was leading by 7 points in the national popular vote, and we were in an economic recession. In 2004, the polls had Bush leading. Al Gore and Bush were tied in the 2000 election. Bill Clinton was leading the polling in 1996 and in 1992. So it's like, oh, wow. In 1988, towards the end, you saw H.W. Bush was leading the polling. Reagan in 84 was leading the polling at the end of the cycle. In 1980, he was leading the polling at the end of the cycle. Like, really, guys, the only impressive victory that he got in terms of election predictions was 2016. But here's the problem. In his paper for his 2016 prediction, he stated that the election model is designed to predict the popular vote winner. Trump didn't pick the popular vote winner, but on live television, he's saying, oh, I'm predicting the electoral college winner. So either he got 2000 wrong when he said Al Gore was going to win the popular vote, or he's getting it wrong in 2016 when he said Trump was going to win the popular vote, according to his own paper in 2016. So either way you look at the model, whether it's a popular vote predictor or an electoral college predictor, he's at least had one wrong prediction. Either way you look at it. And now we have funny Nate Silver over here saying nobody, absolutely no one, not a single soul on this earth. Let's talk about Florida. Should Kamala Harris gamble on a blue Florida? And I actually commented here, the fact that you would even comment or make an article on this is insane. And he's like, oh, it's kind of close. It's a little close. But as we all know, the polling data in Florida heavily underestimates Donald Trump in the state, especially now with the response bias we're seeing in the polling data. It's going to be far worse than it was initially. And so now we can go over to the electoral map and start filling this out. Now that I gave context on news that was coming out, kind of giving a decent breakdown on what was happening, I'm going to go ahead and we'll basically look at the electoral map. But actually, before we do that, I'm going to go ahead and look up something very, very fascinating here that I think is going to be very interesting for everybody to see. This is the biggest indicator that Trump is headed for a victory in November. I mean, if we look at this, we see party identification and leaning. They essentially track the party ID of the two parties every single cycle. And we see, according to these metrics, almost all of them favor the Republican. 48% Republican lean, 45% Democrat lean. It's also been a pretty good indicator of the popular vote too, by the way. And that favors the Republican. Party better able to handle the most important problem, which is the economy and immigration. And we'll scroll down. You'll see that Republicans lead by 5. U.S. satisfaction down to 22%. Economic confidence down to 28, minus 28. It was minus 72 back in 2008. That's the worst it's ever been. And this is the second worst it's ever been, going back all the way to 1992. Looking at party being able to keep America prosperous, a 6-point lead for the Republicans, and the Republicans are at 50%. Biden's job approval, when this was conducted in about mid-September, 39% approval rating. Party favorability ratings roughly tied. The Republicans are ahead. Party better able to keep America safe from international threats. A 14-point lead for the Republicans. Preference for government activity, 55% do less. When we look at the chart, it's actually higher most of the time. Usually the do more is higher, but the administration has been so bad that now a majority of voters want the government to do less, which is another bad sign for Kamala Harris. And congressional job approval rating is about 20%, and it's always low. That is always low. But we see here, what's very interesting is we see that looking at the party leaning of every single year going back to 1992, you'll have a pretty good idea of where the race would have ended up being. You see in 2000, it was a little bit more of a Democrat lead, but ended up being closer. 2004, it was about a tie, and Bush ended up winning the popular vote by like 2 points when that happened. 2008, it was about D+8 in terms of the party lean. Barack Obama won by 7.2. 2012, it was D+4. He won by 3.9 in the popular vote. Clinton won by 2.1 points in the popular vote, and this was a D+3 party lean. This in 2020 was D+5, and Biden won the popular vote by 4.5. Now it's 48% Republican to 45% Democrat, and you see there, that is a horrible sign for Democrats that Republicans, the first time going back all the way to 1992, they're leading the party leaning for the first time ever in the history of Gallup polling, which has been a lot more accurate than your mainstream media pollsters. If we look over here, we see the party that will keep America more prosperous. The Republicans now have a 6-point lead. They have not had this good of an advantage since all the way back in 1988 when George H.W. Bush beat Michael Dukakis in a landslide election. We can also see here the most important issues are economy and immigration. And usually the party that is leading the issue tends to be the winner of the election as well. Same thing over here as well. You can see 2016 Republicans were 4 points up on this, and Trump won. Democrats led by 1, and Biden won. So this has been somewhat confident. I mean, and look at this. You see here 2020 -4, the Republican won. Economic confidence -1 in 2016. You saw the Democrats were the incumbent. The Republican won. 2012 -1. Obama barely held on, you know, according to this metric, but he still beat Romney fairly easily. That's how bad of a candidate he was. All of the metrics, or some of them, were pointing to him losing, and he still ended up eking it out. That's how bad Romney was as a GOP nominee. Looking at 2008, -72, the Republicans were the incumbent party. Democrats won. 2004, up 1. Republican won re-election. 2000, up 44. The Republican won, but that was a little bit weird. You know, you did have, you know, the 8 years of Democrat presidencies. And in 1992, when it was -37, and George H.W. Bush was the incumbent, Bill Clinton won that election. National satisfaction, you can see here, usually when it's on the lower end, usually they do tend to lose. See, 2008, only 13%. The Republicans was the incumbent, the Democrat won. 1992, 22%. The Democrat ended up winning when the Republican was the incumbent. 19%, the Democrat was the incumbent, and the Republican won. So you see, every time it's like around 25 or below, usually that's when the party loses. You saw 28% here in 2020, the Republican, Donald Trump, was the incumbent. Joe Biden ended up winning. Now it's at 22%, the same as 1992, when Bill Clinton beat H.W. Bush by a pretty considerable margin in the Electoral College with some third-party turnout, which has now, a lot of it's gone to Donald Trump because he was able to pick up some support after Robert F. Kennedy Jr. endorsed him. And so looking at all of this, it is very, very possible to see that Donald Trump is in a very, very good spot heading into this race. He is headed for a pretty good chance at winning the election. Now that I've given you a decent update on what's been going on politically throughout the year and all of the good signs for the particular party that is going to win in this prediction, I'm going to be filling out the map right now. So right now we have Utah, Idaho, Wyoming, Montana, North Dakota, South Dakota, all of Nebraska except the 2nd Congressional District tends to be a little bit more liberal. Kansas, Oklahoma, Alaska, as well as Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, including Alabama, Tennessee, Kentucky, Indiana, West Virginia, and Missouri are all in the safe Republican column, including Maine 2nd, as well as South Carolina are also in the safe Republican column. But we are adding 2 new states. Iowa and Ohio will now be added in this safe column for Donald Trump. When we go over here and look up the 2020 map, it's very, very straightforward. We can see right here that Donald Trump in the last election cycle only won Iowa by roughly 8 points, as you can see right here, and he won Ohio by 8 points, as you can see right here as well. So that is something very important to take note of. And when we go over here, he's now winning them by over 15 points. Again, we said the environment is Trump plus 2 to 3, which a lot of accurate pollsters like Rasmussen reports are indicating. Atlas Intel is even indicating a Trump plus 3.5 popular vote win. Gallup's polling has a 3-point lead for Republicans in party ID, and Republicans usually tend to outperform the party ID leaning, by the way. They usually always tend to outperform it. So that's also pretty interesting. But when we see here, Donald Trump is looking strong in the safe states. Kamala Harris safe in California, only about a 19-point win for her there. Maryland, Massachusetts, District of Columbia, and Vermont are in the safe Democratic column, but they are smaller victories than what they were in the last cycle. And so now Kamala Harris only has 81 safe electoral college votes. And what's very interesting is if we go over here, Joe Biden had way more safe states in the last cycle. The environment shifting from Biden plus 4.5 all the way to Trump plus 3, 3.5. That's a big shift, and you're going to see that in almost every single state. Every state is going to move to the right from where it was in the previous cycle. The possible exception could be Colorado, but I still think it's going to move a couple points to the right, but not as much as the nation as a whole. Colorado, to start off, is in the likely Democrat column. It should roughly be about a 9-point victory, 10-point win in this forecast. Oregon, a 10-point win. Washington, around 12 points in this forecast. If we look at the state of Texas, around a 14-point win for Donald Trump. He won the state by 5 last time and is looking much stronger in the state than he was just a couple years ago when he only won the state by 5.5. He's improving here by 9 points, which is larger than the shift nationwide, which could be explained by the illegal immigration issue and the fact that Texas is the center of that. Texas may actually even trend to the right this cycle, depending on how Hispanics in the southern border play out. Arizona and Nevada are in the likely Republican column as well. Those are pretty big wins compared to before. I mean, Arizona last cycle was a pretty close race, and we saw Maricopa is in fact a pretty liberal county now, or at least it's the impression of a liberal county. This county right here, Maricopa County, that's where Joe Biden was able to win the election. He racked up the score in Maricopa. He flipped it from Donald Trump. He won it, and that's how Joe Biden was able to win the state of Arizona very narrowly. Donald Trump in the southern eastern part of the state did catch up, though, and made gains there, including some western parts of the state, and even a little bit to an extent around the border area. But Biden was able to narrowly eke out a win because of his gains in Maricopa County. However, a lot of polling there suggests Donald Trump's going to win that county by anywhere from 4 to 6 points. If that happens, he's guaranteed a minimum of a 4-point win in Arizona. And a lot of Hispanics are there, and Donald Trump in the national crosstabs is gaining with Hispanics by a pretty decent amount. And so that could be a big warning sign for him come November in the state. Now, or for Kamala Harris, Nevada, right now, a large population is Clark County. That's where the majority of the population of the state is located, and there's a lot of food service working industry there. There's a large amount of them, and the fact that Kamala Harris is not doing great with this demographic, especially since she copied Donald Trump's no tax on tips policy, that's going to be really bad for her in Clark County. And even polling that's been done suggests that that county is going to be a lot closer and could lead to a pretty decent win for Donald Trump in Nevada, like I'm suggesting. Moving on to the next couple states, we have Wisconsin in the likely Republican column. The polling is pretty close here. We can see this was a state that was decided by really close margins. It was practically a tie back in the last cycle, but what's very fascinating is that the polling had Joe Biden leading anywhere from 7 to 8 points ahead in the state of Wisconsin, and now Kamala Harris only leads by 1 point, and the polling error has occurred twice in the state. And so since pollsters necessarily haven't changed their methodologies too much, that's going to be a bad sign for Kamala Harris in Wisconsin. Pennsylvania is another one that is going to be a huge problem because Pennsylvania, you see this area over here. This area right here is very, very key. This eastern part of the state right here is super important because that's where Joe Biden outperformed Donald Trump. He essentially was able to use his Scranton Joe appeal in that area of the state. You'll be able to see it right here when I highlight it. You can see this part, eastern Pennsylvania, is a huge portion of why Biden actually won the election in Pennsylvania. Kamala Harris does not have the same strength that Joe Biden did because it was a unique strength in the state. Joe Biden had already lost a lot of that support even as the incumbent. So now, looking at that state, that's going to be in the likely Republican column as well. Probably a 5 to 6 point win. Wisconsin is looking like a 6 to 7 point win. Hawaii is going to be in the likely Democrat column below 15 points. We had the Maui fire disaster. That's going to play a pretty big factor into that. And so that's definitely going to shift the state. And what's very fascinating is the state as a whole, I mean, has already been shifting pretty Republican either way. I mean, here, it was roughly about a 29-point win. The last cycle before that, it was roughly a 32-point win. Before that, it was like a 45-point win. So each cycle, it's actually trended to the right, like 5 to 10 points, depending on what cycle you're looking at. So that's pretty interesting as well. And so those are bad signs for Kamala Harris in Hawaii. Now, do I think she's going to lose it? No, I really don't think so, unless the Asian vote does go to Donald Trump. Like the majority of the Asian vote goes to him, but I don't even think that's going to happen. I do suspect it'll be a lot closer though, but we see that Hawaii is going to be a lot more closer than people are expecting. Same thing out of Maine's 1st congressional district is going to be a lot closer. Illinois, only a 9-point win. A lot of people in Illinois, this is another key thing with the illegal immigration thing. Chicago has been very affected by illegal immigration. This part up here, this part of the state up here has really been affected by illegal immigration, and that's going to be a big problem for Kamala Harris going into November. And so that's why we have it a lot closer. One of the main reasons why the African-American vote is shifting towards Trump is because more African-American men, particularly younger, are coming out in droves to vote for the former president, on top of some of the women votes still shifting to Donald Trump from 2020. Fun fact, he actually gained more from African-American women than he even did from African-American men, which is pretty fascinating. But we see again, New York is another big sign that there's problems. A lot of the polling has it as a 12, 13-point win. You cannot have New York's polling be an 11, 12, and 13-point victory for Kamala Harris and somehow have Kamala Harris up in the popular vote by 2 points. It's not going to happen. Hillary Clinton, when she won the popular vote by 2 points, the state was like a 23-point win, 22-point win. So if Donald Trump really gets this margin down, I actually have it at 9 to 10, but the polling suggests it's going to be like 11 to 14 for Kamala Harris. If that really goes down by that much, the popular vote is going to be a Trump victory if that's the case. Looking at the next state, we'll be going to North Carolina there. Very, very fascinating, but North Carolina is another state where you do see this part of the state right here, this northern part, this northern eastern part of the state has been moving Republican, while the southern part has kind of been stagnating a little bit, and the rightward side the western side has been moving pretty Republican. So it's a pretty interesting state because a lot of the trends in the state tend to kind of cancel themselves out, which I think is pretty cool. And that's why the state usually is a stagnant state heading into the election. Now, looking at another state here, we can see right now that will go in the likely Republican column. Connecticut, Delaware, Rhode Island, New Jersey will all be likely Democrat. You're going to see some support for Kamala Harris regress from Joe Biden's performance. Florida, I mean, guys, Florida is going to be in the likely Republican column at like 12 or 13 points for Trump. You see here in Florida, Miami-Dade County was a huge, huge factor in Donald Trump's victory because Joe Biden only won the county by 7 points. Hillary Clinton won that county by 33. So even though he gained in certain suburban parts of Central Florida and even some in Northern Florida, including Duval, which I suspect will flip back to Donald Trump, Donald Trump gained massively in the southern part of Florida, which helped him carry the state by more than what he did in 2016. Now, looking at the electoral map, we also have the state of Georgia in the likely Republican column. A lot of people may be surprised by this because you're like, whoa, there's no way. Well, it's very, very simple. Looking at Georgia, this is the area that carried Joe Biden to victory in the last election. It was the Atlanta area that actually carried Joe Biden to victory, but not necessarily the inner parts of it. It was actually more the suburban parts. But again, Kamala Harris is not the same as Joe Biden. So the problem with Kamala Harris is she's doing way worse with suburban voters, which a lot of them are in these outer skirts of Atlanta right here. But Donald Trump is still improving with African American voters. So that margin is going to really decrease from about 4 years ago, on top of the outer part of the state not necessarily really approving of Kamala Harris either. So that's going to be a big problem going into the election as well. And so now, looking at all the states we have listed right here, we have the true battleground states. Donald Trump at 297 electoral college votes already with the likely Republican states. Michigan is going to be in the lean Republican column. Donald Trump has really made a play at basically getting at, automotive, workers, that kind of industry, and that's a big portion of Michigan voters. They don't really approve of Kamala Harris. And African-American, votes definitely going to be shifting right, especially with young African-American men coming out to vote for Donald Trump. New Mexico, just about a 1.5 point win for Kamala Harris. This state does have the highest Hispanic population. With Donald Trump improving with that group, you're going to see this state get a lot more competitive than what people are suspecting. And you see the entire Sun Belt, the Western Sun Belt, has moved completely to the right. And so now with New Mexico, it would only make sense for it to also shift, especially because of the Hispanic vote shifting as well. Virginia is going to be about a 1 to 2 point win for Kamala Harris, similar to New Mexico, probably maybe 2 to 3 points. But you do see that it is going to trend to the left, but you're still going to see a massive shift in Virginia due to the fact that, again, African-American voters are shifting to the right, but also white suburban voters. And the rural turnout in the state, when you actually look at the early returns, we do not know the splitting of them. But what's very interesting is the districts right here, this very Republican area of the state, turnout in that area is a lot higher than some of your traditionally bluer districts in the state of Virginia, which is good news for Republicans. Looking at the other states here, the final 3 districts and states up here, Nebraska second. Our model currently has it in the lean Democrat column. It has been trending to the left the past couple years. This is where Lincoln is located in Nebraska, and it has been moving left. And so we do suspect that even though Donald Trump is going to be up here by 3 points in the popular vote, Nebraska second may still end up going lean Democrat. If we look at New Hampshire and Maine at large, these are interesting because Donald Trump, again, has been improving with independents. There's a lot of them with New Hampshire and Maine, and Republican registrations in both states, especially in New Hampshire, have increased even before the 2024 primaries when Nikki Haley was going against Donald Trump. And so New Hampshire may actually be a pretty competitive state. It may be a lot closer. I'm not sure exactly what to call it right now, but I would tilt it Harris very, very narrowly. I do think it's going to come down to the wire. Maine at large may also come down pretty narrowly to Kamala Harris. I mean, she just had to go campaign in New Hampshire not even that long ago, and there were reports saying that both campaigns have Maine as a pretty competitive state when you look at both of their internals. Minnesota is the last state on the map here, and what's very fascinating is, again, this state in our model is actually flipping to Donald Trump very, very narrowly, as he is ahead by around 3 to 3.5 points. And our election model, it's very, very close right now. We'll see how it develops over time, but currently Donald Trump is the very, very slight favorite, according to our model, to actually be ahead in the state of Minnesota. And so when you look at the final electoral tally, 322 electoral college votes to Democrats 216 electoral college votes. If you guys did enjoy this video, make sure to go ahead and hit the like button and to subscribe if you want more content just like this. And I will see you guys in the next video.